Hello. By 2026, the technology and research group Gartner are suggesting that organic traffic from traditional SEO may drop by up to 50%, which is a pretty high amount. May drop by 25% if we're being a bit more conservative, may drop even a little bit less than that in the next year to 2 years, which means that you as a marketer need to stay ahead of that and be focused on what are they losing it out to. And that thing is generative engines like ChatGPT, like Claude, Perplexity AI. They're all kind of taking a little bit of a bite into traditional search and the traffic that we're used to receiving. But there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity for us to get ranked in there, make sure that we're still getting all that lovely organic traffic through to our website, that our business is achieving lead generation and sales, especially for e-commerce. How do we do it? And that's what we're going to accomplish in today's session. So I'm joined by Charlie Marchant, CEO of Exposure Ninja, as well as Andy Tuxford, who is our head of SEO, and Nicola Tuxford, our SEO strategy manager. Although writing those into the notes earlier, I was thinking perhaps those titles need to change to head of GEO and SEO. I'm not sure. Andy, up first, I'd love to know, and for everybody watching and listening along, what is GEO?
Okay, so yeah, GEO is, well, it stands for Generative Engine Optimisation, as you mentioned earlier. I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with the term GEO because it's an emerging field, so it's that's what name is being used at the moment, but I'm not sure how wide of usage it is. But essentially, what it boils down to is it's SEO for AI platforms. It's optimizing your content to get you don't get rankings, you get mentions in AI platforms to get your content mentioned in the answers these platforms give to their users. So users then use that content to find your business and then interact with your business. So boiling it all down, that's what it all comes down to. And we'll cover in a little bit sort of lots where it's got a lot of similarities and differences with SEO. I will be comparing it quite a bit to SEO because it does overlap quite a bit there, but it is essentially SEO for AI platforms if you wanted to really simplify it down to a sentence.
Charlie, I wonder, having the conversations that you've had recently with going to the B2B Marketing Expo in London, whether this term or just generative engines and how it may be impacted by whatever percentage, if we're conservative, if we say it's 10% impact to traditional search. Are marketers thinking about this enough yet, do you think?
I think they've started thinking about it. I think, like Andy said, they're not necessarily aware of the term GEO, and some people are still thinking about AI. And I think the usage amongst marketers of AI using ChatGPT for their actual workflows, to improve copy, to test ad variations, we're seeing a lot of that. But I think we're not yet seeing that many people thinking about how do I get my business mentioned in here and how do I impact what is being said about my business, the positioning against other competitors within those AI chatbots. And I think partially that's because a lot of marketers haven't yet thought through what the strategy needs to be there, and partially because Google is still such a big player in organic search, even though we have started to see them lose some of their share of search. But because it's such a big player, I think there's so much focus on like the here and now present of where traffic is coming from, and less so on what is this going to look like in the future and how is AI going to change that as these platforms evolve, which they will do. We've seen them rapidly evolve already over the past couple of years. So are marketers using it? Yes. Are they forward focused enough? Probably not quite yet.
Nick, I wonder, thinking about the present, are we starting to see the impact in analytics? Are we starting to see the generative engines start to deliver traffic, or are we seeing any traffic just generally across marketing as a whole? Are we starting to see a bit of a decrease? And lastly, do you predict that we should see a decrease in the next couple of years?
Big question. Lots of parts. So I have seen some traffic from AI platforms. I wouldn't say at the moment it's huge, but then I think it's very dispersed. What I will say is that within Search Console, actually, that's probably where the more interesting things are happening, in that search terms are being a lot more descriptive. There's a lot more long-tailed stuff coming through Search Console now, and people are starting to use Google in a similar way to a chatbot, where they are asking questions. They are almost like when we were predicting that voice search was going to be really heavy, the type of things we were expecting to see with voice search, and voice search didn't really happen in the way that at one point we thought it was, but we are starting to see that happen with AI, and people's way of finding information is clearly changing.
I'm curious. Well, I'm not so much curious as in I kind of know the answer, but for the people listening along, how is generative engine, or the spread of it, impacting Google itself? Have we started to see a change to how it delivers results? Like, people are starting to change the way they do searches, but is Google itself changing too?
Well, yeah, because of course we've got AI overviews, which is Google's AI search results. And that's a really unique thing in that it is a combination of information. So you aren't necessarily giving every single bit of information there. You are alongside other platforms. And that's a great thing for small websites, new websites, because it means that you can appear with big, strong websites just by complementing the information that they are providing. And what I mean there is, if you see an AI overview that's got a list of 10 things that are popping up, you add 11 and 12 to that list, and you could be appearing alongside the likes of Wikipedia, the likes of Forbes, because you're adding to that information. It's not as competitive as traditional SEO is. But also, I think as well in the search, there's a lot of interesting interactivity. I'm seeing a lot more featured snippets, new interactive tools that you can use. And I think Google's really going all in on that continued search, keeping people searching in a way that will get them the answer they want, rather than researching with a new term, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you mean. I want, and there's a question in our live chat as well. Feel free to drop questions and we can try and cover them at the end if we can. I was talking about, basically, we would need a bit of an upgrade in our skill set in order to still do the work that you're suggesting, like how to rank alongside your Wikipedias and so on in the results. Andy, I wonder if you can cover, like, very briefly, some of the, like, how important you see that new skill set in an SEO or a marketer's kind of total list of things they need to be able to do. Do you see that rising importance? Is it the most important thing they should be focused on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important for them. Like you sort of touched on earlier, it's these AI platforms are changing how people even use with Google, how people use Google. It's changing the language they use, changing the types of things they search for. So you've got to be in front of that if you're an SEO, because otherwise the market's going to change, you're going to not, and you're going to be left behind. So you've absolutely got to be in front of that. GEO's really important because as well as it's changing how people use Google and the language they're using, it's an intrinsic part of our lives now, these AI platforms. Everything's got AI now. I don't think I've seen a piece of tech released in the last 6 months that isn't claiming it's got integrated AI to help you do things. And whilst a lot of these things are specific, you know, it touches up your photos for you and things like that, but it's intrinsic in all the tech we're using. It's all sat behind the scenes affecting how they use it. And Geo helps you control how your brand can interact with these AIs, how it can be viewed by these AIs. So it doesn't just directly influence, or it does directly influence the mentions you get in these platforms, but it also affects all these other tools and tech pieces behind that are inbuilt into our lives now, that it's so important. Is if not the number one, it's definitely up there in, you know, top 3 skills that SEOs and marketers should be paying attention to, in my opinion.
And a question for yourself, Charlie. In terms of importance for business owners, CEOs, CMOs, the kind of the top level of the kind of companies that we work with, how important do you think it should be to them? Do you think that they are even aware of it enough at this stage, or do you think there's still some work to do with marketers generally and internally to kind of point them in the right direction?
From what I've seen so far, I think there's still work to be done, but I mean, there's always work to be done. I think this kind of evolution of search is particularly significant for anyone who currently relies on SEO and organic traffic as their main driver for revenue, sales, leads, whatever the business's focus is. And if they're relying on organic traffic now, you always need to be a bit future focused as to what's going to happen to search, because that can change. We all know that Google algorithms can change the situation for a business very quickly. I'm sure there's more business owners than they would like to come forward to say that that has happened to their business before. And that's a really scary thing. So if your business is relying on organic search, then yes, GEO, massive. And marketers, SEOs in those companies need to be thinking about and upskilling in that area quickly. If your business has a multitude of ways that it generates leads, revenue, sales, I think it's less of an urgent concern because you've got other channels bringing you in, keeping everyone fed, keeping that company going, and that's great. But it's one of those things where I think, as Nick said, it's not as immediately competitive because the shift hasn't fully happened. It's at such an early stage now that it poses such a massive opportunity for businesses who are thinking about it because they're ahead of the game. Whereas if you're entering into Google ads now, if you're entering into SEO now, particularly if you're in a business that's in a very competitive space or a market that's become more saturated over time, that's a really difficult place to put your stake and actually start making progress, especially if you're earlier on in the business or you've got a lot of competitors who have got a lot of money that they can pour into their digital marketing. That I think it's a really nice opportunity for those businesses to also be thinking about in terms of differentiating themselves and thinking about marketing channels that might drive them more and more traffic, leads, sales, conversions in the future as well.
I love that. I often think about, with this particular subject, it's like a marathon. Like, a marathon, there's thousands of people sometimes. You can either, start at the very front and try your best and you do your practice and you do all the work beforehand so you can lead the race. Otherwise, if you don't, you just turn up on the day after a night out or, a late night and a pizza and a kebab and you're like, right, I'm going to do a marathon tomorrow. And you just turn up and you're at the back and you're like, I've got no chance.
And that's not how you want to start a marathon.
Absolutely not. And I should know. I mean, I've done plenty of marathons in my time, so you'll see by looking at me. I do want to touch a little bit before we get on to the idea of how to do a high level strategy, because this is what you've been working on for the last 18 months, almost 2 years, and doing some great work for clients, which we'll touch upon at the end. But first, I want to just cover for people how these engines work. How do generative engines generally work? And I wonder who would like to put the hand up and take that question first.
I can jump in on that one. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about similarities with SEO and differences with SEO, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of how they work. To kind of try and put a bow on it and give you a little soundbite in how they work is these AI platforms are concerned with data points, whereas SEO is concerned with pages. So one way you can kind of look at it is, say you wanted to learn how, bear with me on this one, say you wanted to learn how gravity works. SEO is kind of like going to the library and say, how does gravity work? And they say, oh, here's all our physics books, and these books specifically are about gravity. So choose one of those books and you can read it and learn about it. AI is kind of like being able to talk to a physicist directly, and they will then tell you how it works and then go, I know that because of these books that I've read. So that's kind of the difference between them. So as I said, there's a lot of similarities between them in terms of how they work. And if you're doing SEO, you're probably going to be gaining some GEO benefits just by doing SEO. It's kind of a bit like baking. You can use the same ingredients, so you can get a cake or cookies or brownies, but just putting together in slightly different mixers or doing things a little bit differently. We're still using the same ingredients. GEO and SEO are a bit like that. They're using all the same. They're using the same ingredients, they're using the same parts, but they're putting them together a little bit differently to determine how they're prioritizing. content. So yeah, some other similarities with SEO. So content quality is really important for it. It's looking for high quality content. You're not going to rank if your content's not good, and it's the same factors that are considered high quality: depth, expertise, all these other factors. EAT specifically very big in GEO, and if you're doing SEO, you should be knowing what EAT is and responding to that. Yes, making sure you're staying relevant to the content. So all these factors, big for SEO, also big for GEO. Before I jump into differences, does anybody else want to offer some similarities as well?
I think context and content relevance is still a huge thing for GEO. The content you're putting out there has to be relevant to the type of readers you want. You have to be able to speak to an AI and not a human being. So it's still a computer. It's still, it's not like there's a small Einstein clone who's typing up your, the right responses. So you do still have to be able to create the content that actually says what it needs to say to a robot. And so things like readability levels and stuff like that, again, still really important. Search terms are still important, and it's still important to be using things like Search Console to see what people are searching for. Yeah, so I think Andy covered off a lot. And I'm probably more of the expert on the differences.
Before we get into the differences, Nick and Andy, one of the things that I noticed was confusing marketers quite a lot about Gen AI was that ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, etc., isn't just giving you the same as what's at the top of the Google search results. So, both Google and search engine algorithms and generative engines are synthesizing like loads of data. They're bringing in loads and loads of data, and Gen AI is, those models are learning, processing natural language, looking for patterns. Why do we know why they're not bringing just the same sort of results as the Google search results?
Well, I have quite a few theories. So I think Gen AI is so much more personalized for a start. ChatGPT, for example, uses memory. Gemini has gems. There's a lot of learning from the people who are inputting. So the more you've used the Gen AI, the more it knows about you, and the more it's going to give you what it thinks you want to hear. So I would say if you want to test things, do it on a fresh or clear the memory if you dare. I don't like to clear my memory, so I just prefer to just use a sort of a fresh account. And also as well, I think that it tests a lot still, so it's almost like constantly going through algo updates. It's so new. I think it's testing, seeing what works, and it's testing that individualism as well, what people are going to respond to well, what people are going to click on, what works for them, because it is supposed to be quite an individual experience, but also as well, it needs to learn off things. It needs to continually develop and get better and get better. So they're my sort of theories. I don't know whether Andy's got any other theories that I've not covered off.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember these are different platforms, and they all have their own sort of secret sauce of how they're mixing all the ingredients together to work out what results they get. Similar to Bing and Google, you do the same search in Bing and Google, you'll get different results. There's often similarities, but you'll get different results. And it's similar with these different AI platforms. Whilst they are using the same ingredients as Google to sort of work out what's good and what isn't, they're weighting it differently and they're mixing it together differently. So that's why you're getting these different results. That's why you're getting these different results. But the overall things that are beneficial across all of them. It's just some are a bit more beneficial than others in some platforms versus others.
I'm going to take us back just a second because, Andy, when you were going through the similarities of SEO, you used an abbreviation that I'm not entirely sure everybody who's going to be listening and watching is aware of, which is EEAT. And I wonder if you could just take a second to explain.
So that stands for, you're testing me now, expertise, experience, authority, authoritativeness, sorry, not authority, and trustworthiness. So it's basically a core metric that Google uses to evaluate how much weight it can put on what you're saying, basically. The higher your EAT, the more trustworthy your content is. They've viewed your content to be, it's written by experts, you're covering everything you need to, it's trustworthy, so they're going to favor that in search results. So it's the same sort of thing. It's about proving your experience. It's the same way as how would you explain to someone why they should listen to what you have to say on a subject. It's the same sort of metrics that Google's trying to evaluate to determine, okay, we should listen to that person over that person because that person's got 10 years experience in this niche, whereas that person started yesterday. So that person's going to have more authority and trustworthiness because they've been doing it longer. It's essentially, that's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
I feel like Nick was going to jump in with a bit more there, and I'm curious.
I might be getting ahead of us, but my theory is that it's EEAT with a twist. And the twist is that you do not control your EEAT entirely when it comes to Gen AI, because Gen AI pulls from third party a lot. So reviews, user-generated content, external articles, these are all feeding in there. So you've got to really be on top of your brand reputation, and it's EEAT supercharged, it's top difficulty level right now. And I think that's something that people need to be mindful of. It's not just about what's on your website, it's about what's on everybody's websites.
Oh, I love that. I want to double click. I want to learn more about that. But before we do, perhaps we could just go a little bit into the differences between SEO and GEO, so we have a full understanding of like what's staying the same essentially, but the new bits that we need to know, which sounds like you're touching on as well. Who'd like to grab that one?
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So, yeah, as kind of mentioned, the main difference is the difference weighting. So Nick touched on some there. So user-generated content is definitely a thing with these AI platforms, and it's quite an important thing. Whereas we know for quite a while, Google's not really paid much attention to user-generated content, partly because it's so easy to gain with Google, because you can just, have someone sit there adding links to forums all day and loads of backlinks. So Google started ignoring it. Whereas AIs, because they have a better understanding of what is being discussed, the language being used, they're not just looking for a link, they're looking at what is that person saying about that business, how are they talking about that business. And it's also easy for these AIs to spot, oh, it's somebody just adding the same content on all these places, so it can discount it. Whereas that's where UGC really starts, or user-generated content really starts to come in with AI, is it's picking up all these elements, all these people talking about your business, hopefully all these people talking about your business in a positive manner. So then it applies that to the business and go, okay, if all these people think highly of this business, then it must be a decent business. Similar way as Google does with reviews. We know Google factors in reviews. You get a lot of reviews, you tend to rank better in Google. But AI's a bit more nuanced in it. Doesn't have to be a specific review with a score. It's starting picking up all these people are just talking positively about this business. So it's well thought of. Another area is AI seems to have a much stronger recency bias than Google does. So we know Google does tend to weight more recent content a bit higher than older content, but there's also a lot of evergreen content out there in Google, content that's been around for years that ranks really well because it's still relevant. Whereas AI seems to have a much stronger recency bias, it weights much higher, more recent information that it picks up. So whether that's positive sentiment for your business, people talking about it, or new content you're putting up, it seems to give that much more weight than Google does, just by it being more recent. So I will hand off to Nick now if there's areas he wants to add.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just to sort of a little warning related to what Andy said about external content. It has to be genuine. Like, you can't fix this. The only way you are going to maintain your reputation and establish your brand is by providing an excellent product, an excellent customer service. And I think that's great. I think it's a great thing that businesses are going to be rewarded for being great. But there are some ways that you can support it by making sure that when you do provide customer service, you send out a link to be reviewed, or, you contact your customers and say, you know, really glad you enjoyed our product or our service. Please, can you leave me a review? So just to sort of add that to it. On sort of the differences, copy structure. Copy structure seems to have a big impact now. Short, easy to sort of section structures tend to be appearing. Lists, great, because lists, it can take little bits. That's what AI likes to do. It likes to take little bits of information from different sources and put them together in a cohesive post or response. So if you can make your copy structured in a way that allows AI platforms to do that, that allows it to combine with other sources, and you want it to combine with other sources, by the way, then do so. So lots of headings as well. Make sure the headings are clear. Make sure you're using the right types of headings as well, so that everything is really easy for the AI just to pick up and go, yep, that belongs there. That belongs on this part of the list. I talked about context earlier, but clearer context is more important. So you have to be really clear about what you're talking about. So I'm trying to think of an example. Well, one of the things is when, like for me, I do musical theatre. So if I put a musical like Oklahoma, I would put Oklahoma, the musical. I wouldn't put Oklahoma, because I wanted people to know that it's a musical. If I'm doing beauty and it's vegan beauty, I wouldn't put vegan. I would put vegan beauty products, because it helps to deliver that context over and spell it out to the AIs, and they know this is what we're talking about. So yeah, I think that's everything, unless, Andy, you can think of anything I've forgotten.
I'd just add, don't be scared of different content types, either different formats, data formats. So I think SEOs in general have been a bit scared of different data formats other than just straight copy, because Google traditionally hasn't been the best at understanding it. It's got better over the years, but traditionally it's never been the best, whereas AI doesn't seem to have any of these problems. So don't be scared to, you know, put a video in if it's relevant, put a podcast in, use data tables. Don't be scared to use different data formats. In fact, a lot of these AIs seem to kind of like it and prefer it, so over just straight copy. So where it's relevant, but don't be scared of different data formats and think everything's got to be in text, otherwise it's not going to be read properly.
Yeah, and just that reminds me of something else. Don't worry about linking out to competition either. It doesn't matter. If you're adding something to someone who's already ranking for that search term, then do not be afraid to pop an external link out to them. AI will see that relationship, and it will see that the information is relative to one another, and potentially put you in the same AI overview or in the same generative search response. So it's not something that we need to worry about anymore when it comes to GEO. We can work with our competition all we want.
I love that. At the end of the day, our content is there to serve as a valuable resource to our target market audience, to the eventual hopeful end consumer of our services or products. So like the better journey they have to finding and acquiring those, great. Like it's not like they don't know about the competitors. It's just like, yeah, of course they do. They're going to shop around. If, I'm looking for some trainers, I'm going to look at every brand. I'm not like, even the people who are like super loyal with the brand will have a look around and see what everyone else is doing anyway. So yeah, I like that. That's gradually shifting. I'm going to take us back very briefly just to talk about the coverage part of this, and perhaps you're going to come on to this a little bit later, but I know with Charlie and Charlie's digital PR background, we'll know a lot about like how to get that coverage, to get you noticed everywhere, mentioned everywhere, to kind of make LLMs, but especially people more aware of your business and the things that you offer. I wonder if you see any change to how digital PR or PR generally will function, or if it's the same but a larger scale. Do you see any change at all? Maybe it's just the same as before.
my feeling is that businesses are going to have to do a broader amount of PR, and they're going to have to work harder at getting it as well. But they're also going to have to look at different types of PR. So the trend in SEO and content and PR at the moment has lent much towards trying to get high DA, so domain authority links. And that's often people looking for things like, I want to be in the Telegraph, the Guardian, the Independent, these really well-known websites, or, the New York Times if you're US. And sometimes also paying thousands, tens of thousands for features in those, because they feel like that's going to be the most impactful in terms of eyes on it, but also in terms of the quality of that link juice, if you want to put it that way. Because generative AI is looking at so many different things, and like Nick mentioned earlier, it's looking at review sites, it's looking at influencers, it's looking at all sorts. I think there's more that we're going to be expecting PRs to be doing in a broader sense when it comes to link building, when it comes to actually getting the brands mentioned. And it's not necessarily about getting the backlink anymore. It's about getting that exposure. And that's going to seep into what we call influencer marketing, working with bloggers, working with social media influencers. It's sponsorships, things like if you sponsor your local football team, if there's a charity partner that you work with, all of that sort of thing, I think is going to come into it so much more with PR.
Yeah, I think just to quickly add on that, I think Charlie just mentioned, quickly touched on there about the backlink. With these AI platforms, the backlink's not the goal at the end of it. It's not the prize that you want. You want to be talked about. That's what you want. It will pick up that you're being talked about by these sites, whether they're linking to you or not. It will pick it up and connect it to your business. So don't get me wrong, backlinks are great. I'm still SEO at heart. Love some backlinks, but with GEO, it's not necessarily the prize, but being talked about them is just as valuable.
Yeah.
And before we move on to how now we understand the differences and how we start to measure, we'll then touch on go on to strategy. I wonder if backlinks are still quite valuable in some ways, because with ChatGPT search, which has come out, it's built off the back of Bing, which values links a lot more than Google does. Google values like the semantics and the understanding. And clearly have been using like their LLMs a lot longer than Bing has. But I wonder if either of these platforms, whoever runs the engine behind it all, you still need links for discovery. You still need like LLMs, like OpenAI send out GPT bot to crawl the web. How are they going to find that content if it's not being linked to? So there's still, even if we all, I think, agree that LLMs are based around learning from context of content and so on, they still need to find that content. So whilst it isn't the prize, it's still an essential part of that foundation of having a strong, solid SEO strategy.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of two ways to look at this. There's the brand building side, and brand building is very important for GEO. And then there's also the awareness side. And for me, that's about creating shareable content, not necessarily content that is pitched, because I think that there would be two sides of it. You've got your brand, your outreach with expertise, comments, things like that within the publications that you want to target, but also your shareable content, because actually content being shared on the likes of Reddit or Quora will have value as much as content being shared in the Guardian, so long as it's something of value and it's relevant. And I'm not saying go and spam every single Reddit forum you can think of, because it will, it is as smart as Google search engine. It will pick up on that. Again, there is no way to cheat GEO other than being great at what you do. But yeah, if you can keep adding value, firstly, because also that value can be picked up by AI, but also if you're adding enough value that people go, oh, this is a great resource for the question you're asking, here you go, that then signals to these AI platforms, to AI overviews, people think this is a good answer to these types of questions. And the more it's researching, the more it's noticing that.
Superb. I wonder, before we get into the more of the tactical side of like how are you going to do it, if we could just briefly cover how we're going to measure the effectiveness of what we do with GEO? Traditionally, SEO is rankings and organic traffic in your Google Analytics and so on. Is it any similar or different to what marketers are generally used to?
Yeah, so it is quite different how you can actually track the effectiveness of it. This may change over time because it is new, but at the moment there aren't really any tools that let you track sort of how often you're mentioned in these AI platforms. I would love to get something like Search Console for them, where it gives you all the information that you were mentioned this many times. These are the topics you were mentioned against. Love to get something like that. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist. Hopefully, it will come, but it doesn't exist at the moment. As with any marketing effort, the best way to measure the proof's in the pudding. The best way to measure it is your business growing? Is your business developing? Are you getting more business? Are you growing? But I realize that's not particularly helpful if you're doing multiple marketing initiatives and trying to work out which one's actually doing what. As I said, there's no direct way to measure you were mentioned this many times because there's no rankings in AI. It pulls pieces of information, says these pieces of information are relevant. It's not got an index like Google that you can measure your rankings against. You can measure traffic coming into your website from these platforms. It'll show up in Google Analytics or other analytics platforms as referral traffic, and then you just need to check the source and to identify which of these platforms it is. But a secondary way, which is often forgotten as well, is if GEO is working, it should grow your brand search in Google. So you should start getting more and more branded search. You should start seeing more and more branded search. Yes, that's going to come through to your site as organic because they're doing it in Google and then following that link to your website. But you should start seeing that branded search start to grow as your brand is getting bigger, more talked about, more well-known on these AI platforms, and it's being distributed to the people using them, and then they're coming away to Google to search for your brand. This kind of touches into as well another area where I'm a big proponent of doing GEO alongside SEO. One of the main ways that GEO is going to work is people use these AI platforms to search for information. They get the information to the questions they want. A lot of them are then going to go to Google and search for that. So they might search, for example, what's the difference between an MVL and a CVL? Legal terms. And to decide, oh, I need an MVL. So then they'll go to Google and search MVL providers. You want to rank for that as well, to pick up those, as well as hopefully they're following the mention, they're clicking on the link in these AI platforms and going straight to your site, or they're searching for your name MVL or whatever combination it might be. But some of them are going to go there and just search for the service. So you want to be ranking well for that as well. But to go more directly back to measuring it, referral traffic in analytics, you'd also expect to see an increase in branded search as well.
One of the things that you've done recently, Andy, that I really loved was all of our clients have a report that's set up, a custom bespoke report for them, for their business, that shows where their traffic's coming from and what those sources are. And I think we've given great visibility to our clients by actually updating those. There's some lovely pie charts in there that show the segments that are coming from each kind of source, and that gives a really good view on a monthly basis of what's actually coming through to the website from ChatGPT, from Perplexity, from any of those that are showing up in the Google Analytics data, which is great. As you alluded to earlier, Andy, as well, I think there will be eventually tools for this, and I hope that if SEMrush, SE Ranking, or anyone else who is a big tool in the SEO space is listening, that they're working on it. I do know that there's also a startup based in New York called Profound. I'm not meaning to promote them. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but they're called Try Profound. If you Google them, they actually haven't sorted their SEO, but maybe it's because they're so focused on GEO that they're just not bothering with SEO. I don't know, but they've actually got a sort of automated way of checking brand visibility within these Gen AI platforms, measuring sentiment against certain competitors. So it gives you a little bit, but as Andy says, there's nothing that actually gives you a comprehensive view of how many times you're coming up in searches and answers within these AI tools. But I think there's some interesting stuff starting to happen in this space.
We do need to move on to the kind of technical stuff, but before we do, I have one final question, which is for Charlie, and that's because we're still yet to be determined how we can effectively report this inside of businesses and so on. I mean, there are obviously some tools that you just mentioned. How can marketers communicate the importance and the effectiveness of GEO to their line managers, to their C-suite, and so on. In the meantime, like, what would you suggest?
I think the conversations that are worth having are for any marketers who are in businesses where search is a really big part of their revenue. Speaking in those terms to your bosses, to the CEOs, to the board, helps them understand the importance of where the money in the business is coming from, which is ultimately what a for-profit business is paying attention to on a regular basis. And knowing that, you know, we're starting to see analytics data when there's traffic coming from those sources. If you're a bigger brand, you're probably more likely to be seeing that earlier, and also certain types of niches will be seeing that now, whereas others perhaps less so. So it's worth going into Google Analytics and having a look at that data. Or if you already work with an SEO agency, a search agency, having a conversation with them to see if they can get that data and show you where it is in analytics as well, so that you actually have some numbers of what's happening at the early stage. And I think, you know, that I don't think there's any CEO, board, senior people in businesses who aren't using ChatGPT themselves. They're talking to them in, you know, how much are you using it regularly? How much of your searches are you now doing on Gen AI platforms instead? Helps, I think, sort of bring home that this is something that's evolving, that it's coming. And then I don't think anyone should be suggesting like suddenly we move all of our marketing budget into GEO, that's it. What percentage of the marketing budget in that business is allocated for future focused projects? What is happening in the future of marketing, in the future of how we generate our business, and looking at using that budget to allocate to GEO, whether that's doing something yourself to understand, to spend time to use internal resource to actually interact with AI, Gen AI engines and have conversations to understand what it's saying about your business and get a better idea, whether that's looking at how you're going to tweak your SEO campaign or what you're doing in terms of your PR, whether that's actually working with an agency to come up with a plan for what you're going to do. I think that's the conversation that marketers should be having internally.
I think I made a suggestion just the other day that you can start off with this with just 3 to 5 pages to see what you can do with just a handful. You don't have to go with, you know, if you've got a massive website, obviously maybe you change the scale a little bit, but when doing that, you're going to need to know how to do it. So I wonder who would like to take this subject of the tactical side of what you need to do to your content to make it start to appear in generative engines.
I can start. So I think I'll start by prefacing this. There is nothing in GEO that isn't just really great marketing principles anyway. So I think when people think about GEO, they shouldn't think about it as something different they have to do. Everything in GEO is good marketing principles. So let's start with on page. Getting informational content out there now is really, really important. For GEO, the majority of questions are going to be informational. So you want to be the name behind that information. And I think that's something that we need to think about when we write things like blog content, when we write things like outreach pieces. They need to be really valuable, really informational and educational. Ease of reading, again, breaking things up into small paragraphs with headings, lists, points, FAQs as well, summaries at the top of content. So in this article, we are going to talk about X, Y, and Z and just make it really clear up front what's going on. I've actually started on some occasions where relevant, adding captions to images as well, and not just relying on alt tags. So describing the image, crediting photographers where relevant, all of that sort of thing I have found to help with GEO. The more information you can give about the sentiment behind the content you're writing, the relevance of the content, the better. I'm not saying go, you know, over the top and just every tiny minute detail is on there, but certainly if you've got a great picture that is of a particular location or a particular historical monument or something like that that's relevant, tell people in the caption. good healthy mix of external and internal linking across the site as well. And don't forget to go back into old bits of content and link to new bits of content that are relevant and linked to one another. But again, this is SEO principles as well. So you're not necessarily losing out on resource in doing this. You are benefiting SEO, and the majority of GEO is going to benefit SEO. Certainly won't hinder it.
Nick, can we talk a little bit about the GEO game plan that you've just been developing at EN as well? I think it's one of the coolest things I've seen in search in, like, I can't even think how long since I've seen something as groundbreaking and different in search as this. And I haven't seen other agencies who have got offerings in this area. So the fact that you both have been able to develop something at such an early stage, I think is really exciting. And some of the things that I noticed that you have picked up on in sort of what is in that game plan is around AI brand sentiment analysis. It's around gaps and opportunities for those AI overviews as well. And it's in that sort of positioning against competitors in AI as well. Can you talk a little bit about those things and how to influence them?
Yeah. So when you start GEO, it's really important to learn how AI platforms see you. And it may not necessarily be how you think you are seen. So you need to almost interview them. You need to ask them about yourselves and be vain. I've done it before where I've been like, who is the best, such and such in here? And then like really gone all in. And if they're not saying the business that I'm working on, then I'm not happy. I'm going to go in and start doing stuff. But ask it questions that you know to be true, that you know the answer of. So we're not talking about subjective questions, real objective questions. What's my company's values? Is it getting that right? And even going as far as, have you heard of my business? Well, has it? Because I've done it before. Not every AI platform has necessarily heard of the business. It's an assumption that people make. Oh, well, AIs know everything. If they've not heard of your business, you've not got enough brand awareness out there. You can ask about location. Where does this business serve? Is it getting it right? And then take those answers and work out what's right, what's wrong, and what's missing. And so when they've got things right, wonderful, keep doing that. But where you need to look at is what's wrong, but also what's missing, and think about that. Why didn't it mention that this unique selling point is one of ours? Don't expect that it's okay that it's skipped that because you didn't directly ask about it. AI needs to be able to sell what you do to you before it's going to sell it to people who are just generally asking about your service. So it's really important to do that. Through doing that, we've identified all sorts of amazing things. So for a financial institute, we identified that there was some misconceptions based on Trustpilot reviews around financial products only being offered to certain kinds of customers. Completely untrue. But what we realized was that there were Trustpilot reviews that assumed that hadn't been responded to. So we've tasked the client to go out, respond to those reviews, and to make sure that it's clear on Trustpilot that actually that's a misconception. Because if it's not dealt with, the AIs will continue to believe that. We had another client that hadn't been heard of by a couple of AI platforms. So we've recommended that we really do some work on brand identity and getting out there, making sure that their social media accounts are being monitored and used properly, making sure that they're getting enough PR work done. So there's so much information you can find out just by interviewing these platforms and asking the right questions. And and that's something we offer. We do a very in-depth interview with multiple AI platforms. We analyze all of the data, we go through it, and we work out exactly what needs to happen and how that needs to feed into an ongoing marketing campaign. So it's a really exciting way of looking at AI, not just for GEO though, but also for SEO as well.
I think those opportunities are really massive as well. Like the ones you just mentioned there for those businesses are really significant. And I think one of the most successful brands I've seen in terms of their positioning in GEO and the work they've been doing is The Ordinary, who we also work with, and they've been doing a lot here, and good for them. Because if you search in any of the AIs, like who's the best value skincare brand, that's their position in the market, and they are always there. And if you search who's the most expensive, they're not there. And that's the business thinking about where do we want to be seen by which customers, and what are our USPs, what's our place in the market. And I think solidifying that as a business then really helps you to excel in GEO. Andy, I know that AI overviews is pretty much your wheelhouse. Can you talk a little bit about gaps and opportunities for businesses in the AI overviews part of GEO as well?
Yeah, sure. So AI overviews, obviously, they're Google's equivalent of these AI platforms. Appears at the top of search results. Not all of them, but a lot of searches now. So it can be quite difficult to find the gaps because, again, I hope SEMrush and companies like SE Ranking are working on this, but there's no real way of getting this, like looking at a big list of keywords, it'll tell you all the ones with the AI overviews. SEMrush and SE Ranking, I know, both offer, if you're tracking keywords, it will tell you if you hold the AI overview or not. But it only does that for keywords that you are actively tracking. So it can be difficult to find the new opportunities because obviously you're going to want to find keywords that you're not actively tracking as a new opportunity. So the only real way you've got to do it is quite manual, is you've got to just do a lot of searching yourself. And when you do it, you'll start to see trends appearing where these overviews are appearing for you when you search, what types of searches they're appearing for. Almost overwhelmingly informational. You get a few commercial terms in there, but it's overwhelmingly informational. So focus on those informational terms, but then focusing on just trying to spot the trends. Is there particular topics where AI overviews are more likely to appear than others? Because there will be within that data. There almost always is. They appear for more topics that Google's decided needs that bit more information. So it's about finding them, and then following that. Once you've found those, once you've done that, and yeah, it's a big manual piece of work. Once you've done that and you've got okay, these are the topics that Google's serving AI on, and these are the types of questions it's serving it for, you can then start building your plan. And when you're building your plan, it follows the same as GEO, using the same tactics, the same processes to build your plan to it. Google's evaluating the information in the same way as the AI platforms to appear in the AIOs. It's unfortunately there's no quick or easy way to do it yet. Hopefully there will be coming. I'm very hopeful that SEMrush or someone was going to come out with something soon, but at the moment there isn't, unfortunately. So it's manual. It's a lot of manual searching. Then start looking for those patterns. Once you've got those, you can start building your plan.
And how important for businesses would you say those AI overviews are? Like, how useful is it to get them?
It's similar to the featured snippet if you remember back when they came out. I think it's really important to be in there for the same reasons as with GEO. It's getting your brand mention, it's getting visibility, it's having that. It's also a way, as Nick mentioned earlier, you can really compete with some big heavy hitters in your niche. So we've had as Nick mentioned earlier, so SEO is very much it's like the Highlander. There can be only one in the top spot. For me to win, you've got to lose. I've got to knock you off that top spot. The AIOs aren't like that. There's a lot of people appearing in that top spot. There's multiple people in there, so you don't necessarily have to knock somebody off. You can add to and then appear alongside. So we recently had a healthcare business that started appearing alongside AIOs with people like Mayo Clinic and NHS and 111. They're being mentioned in the same content as the NHS and Mayo Clinic, and it's a small private healthcare clinic. By being mentioned in the same breath as them, people are seeing that. That's a huge reputation boost for them. It immediately develops a lot of trust with that brand just by being viewed in the same content as those. So it can be really important on that front. We're not sure exactly how many clicks it drives versus normally appearing in a position one. Yet we've not really got too much data from Google on that yet. So it's hard to say whether it's going to actively be driving clicks. I suspect it will, because you're at the top of searches. Top of searches always tend to do well. They always do well, so I suspect it will. Exactly how much, I don't know at this stage, but I mean, it's like I say, it's a huge trust and brand building exercise. Just like appearing up there, it starts expanding your reach. You start appearing in those as well, you're going to start picking up links organically. When people are looking for content to link to support what they're saying, if you're appearing in that, there's a good chance that they're going to use your source, link to you, build more backlinks, which helps drive SEO as well.
Yeah. Just to add to that, you can also utilize it for the personal branding of people who work within your company. So, for example, if there is an AI overview for who is an expert in, let's say, divorce law, you can make sure that you've got lists of people that are experts in divorce law, and they will, potentially appear in the AI overview as a named expert. So the AI overviews are, they're not just showing people the results. Oh, experts in law on your, your page title tag. It's actually coming in a more trustworthy manner, because when people read the AI overviews, they're telling them this is who we think is an expert in divorce law. It has more of a confidence, a sort of air of confidence to it than just showing up somebody else's first party data. The difference between seeing an advert versus an advertorial, it's like that. So yeah, I think that there's a lot you can do to really boost your brand identity within AI overviews and increase trustworthiness.
There's so much that we've covered so far, and the main thing that we want people to be able to go away with is that they turn everything you've advised and taught us about GEO and the differences between traditional SEO and GEO. The importance of it is that they can put together a strategy. Now, I imagine that not everyone's going to have the ability to do as big a campaign as they may like, but if they need to do it at scale, then obviously please do come and speak to us at Exposure Ninja, because we can certainly help you at scale. How can a marketer go about strategizing an initial GEO strategy for 2025? And Nick, perhaps this is your area of expertise.
Oh, yeah. So I think, first of all, be super clear on what is unique about your business and what is unique about your brand, and then start looking at what your different AI platforms think about that area. So what is your category? Interview them, get to know them, and start to think about, what are they getting right, what are they getting wrong, and then ask the kind of questions that you want to be seen for as well. So, if your business is a financial institution, someone that sells loans, for example, who's the best place to go for an ethical loan? And see, what are they showing? What kind of content are they showing up? And then start to put that in your plan. But I think fundamentally, know who you are, know what your brand identity is, and know how your customers speak as well, because you've got to start speaking in your customers' language, not your own language.
And in terms of, perhaps this one for Andy, the tactical, like deciding as part of your strategy, I'm going to pick a certain number of pages to focus on or phrases to focus on. Is there an initial kind of volume that we should look at to begin with? Should I focus on just 3 pages or just a few terms? Like, I know sometimes we draw up lists and lists and lists of phrases that would be great to rank number 1 for on Google, but should we approach it in the same way for GEO?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a really difficult one to answer, because a lot of it's going to depend on what these tests show from you. So, like Nick said, interview the AIs. That for me is the most important part. Interview the AIs and make sure you spend a full day, 2 days doing it. If you're spending half an hour on it, you're not spending enough time on it. That's going to kick out a lot of information for you. And from that, you need to prioritize based on your business needs and your niche and, what it is specifically doing. If it's telling you that these AI platforms don't understand, are missing one of your key services, obviously that's a big focus that you're going to want to jump on. If it's just saying, it thinks you work in the village next to the one you're in, probably not going to be as big. So it depends on what it's going to be. What you need to be conscious of, similar with SEO, what you need to be conscious of is making sure you're not spreading yourself too thinly. If you try and focus on everything, unless you've got a very big team with a lot of resource, you're not going to be able to. You're just going to be doing a little bit of everything and not really doing much of anything and not solving anything. So focus, keep your focus, and do as much as you can on that target area. So exactly how big that target area is going to be variable, but interview the AIs, make yourself your list of what are the things they're missing on, what do they misunderstand, and what's important, what's the most important to us, and then focus your efforts on those areas and work it through, and then move on to the next one.
Before we do finish, we don't unfortunately have time for questions this time, but I'll see if we can get them answered in some way, and I'll share them in the show notes from this one. But Charlie, I wondered if you could briefly cover like the promotional strategy side of things, like going out there and putting these placements together, the PR kind of side. Would you suggest doing it on a particular kind of one area, one type of publisher? Like, how would you approach it?
Absolutely not. So I think once you've got done the interviews, you've got the outcomes, and you're focusing on, say, points 1, 2, and 3. We need to be seen as whatever it is. We want to be seen as cheaper in the market. We want to be seen as better customer service. We want to be seen as quicker turnaround times. Wherever your focus is going to be, what the content you're doing in PR actually says is really important. So you're not just doing PR for the sake of trying to get as many backlinks or as many articles as possible. You're doing it because you want to have certain things about your business said online in other places. So, I mean, it depends on your resource and budget and what you're already spending on PR, but I would say get those priorities really clear so that you have 1, 2, 3 max, I think, things that are the positioning of your brand that your PR team need to focus on, so that every article, every piece of press they're doing, every influencer opportunity, any work they're doing on review sites or sites like Reddit and Quora, the conversations that they're starting or being involved in, are focused on 1, 2, or 3. It gives them enough freedom to then be choosing what's most relevant to the piece of work that they're doing, because you don't want to work with a publisher and then give them something that just isn't at all relevant or isn't something they would want to publish, isn't what their own readers would be going to. So you do need a bit of creative space within it. And I would also say just look for interesting things that you can do as a business. And to be creative, you don't need to run some massive campaign, but you can build a small tool, you could build a small calculator on your site. If you're something like a legal or financial or healthcare, small calculators are pretty interesting and fun things to do. You could even do a data study if you're the kind of business that's got a lot of data that can be anonymized, or you can put out a survey to gather data and do that as well to find interesting stats within it, and then lead those in your PR with that 1, 2, and 3 positioning pieces that you want to hit. And divide your time so that you're focusing some on good domain authority websites. You might be focusing a small portion on directories, and then some on your influencer social strategy, and then perhaps some on blogs and trade websites, depending on your niche or sector as well.
That's a lot for people to work with, but a lot of great ideas. That's the thing with all of this, is that it's super important. If we are going to be impacted by 25%, 50%, even if it's just 10% decreases in traditional search, I mean, it's not going away. We're still going to profit from that channel. But if they are exploding, we should be a part of it. And hopefully this recording, this live session will help you accomplish that in 2025. And you want to learn more about how to succeed and dominate in 2025, do come back and listen to our next episodes. It's going to be a series, and we're going to be talking on our next one about how to copy or do a highly profitable paid search strategy in 2025 as well. So if you have questions about that, do ping them over. You can email us at ninjas@exposureninja.com, or you can leave your question elsewhere on YouTube. If you're watching us there, we'll pick it up and we'll put it into that episode. But thank you ever so much for sharing so much deep knowledge about GEO. I think this is probably one of the best recordings I've done in like forever. So thank you so much for that. And if you are interested in learning more about the GEO game plan, you can go to exposure.ninja/GEO, and you can learn more about that. Or you can go to exposureninja.com/GEO, and you will learn more about generative engine optimization as a whole and how to do pretty much what you've heard about today. So thank you all for listening and watching along. See you all next week.